Perfect. So now we are recording. So keep your videos off if you don't want to be recorded. So again, my name is Kevin Roth from the Pennypack Trust. Welcome to the first Streamkeeper training of 2021 with the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. On the screen, you can see all of the watershed organizations that are participating tonight. So thank you, volunteers, if you're from one of those organizations. But if everyone could right now in the chat, just tell us which organization you're with. It'd be great to see where everyone's coming in from tonight. There we go. We got Pennypack, good Pennypack showing tonight. TTF out Darby Creek Valley. Thanks for joining us. We got several double dippers here. Deborah Kessler, thank you. Wissahickon, TTF. So a lot of the regular suspects. So thank you guys for joining us. Not sure if obviously Lindsay Blanton is no longer with Wissahickon Trails. I'm not sure if her replacement is here with us tonight. If she is, I'd like her to introduce herself. I don't see her name here, so we'll meet her at another point in time. We got Master Watershed Stewards here too, Penn State Extension, Friends of Heinz Refuge. Wow. Carol Armstrong's very involved. Thanks for joining. I was actually just on another webinar with Carol and invited her, so thanks for joining us. Perfect. So like I said, welcome to the first Streamkeeper training of the year. Many of you were with us the first round of construction site monitoring 2 years ago. So this is round 2. Yeah, so I think I got through all that. Thank you, William Penn Foundation, as always, for sponsoring all of this. It's a really exciting initiative that we were funded to work with all these organizations, and River Network was funded to help us. So this is a product of that, and we're very excited to reboot this process tonight. And make sure no one else is trying to get in participant-wise. And I think we're good. Okay. So we're all here for the Construction Site Monitoring version 2 program. How and why did this all start? If you could change the slide, please. Thank you. This is the confluence of an unnamed tributary to the Pennypack Creek. There was a new housing development being built along this tributary. And when I first saw this, I called anyone who would listen. The DEP, Fish and Boat Commission, the Conservation District, multiple conservation districts, the township, my mom, anyone who would listen, really. But this kept happening. Exactly what you see. This is sediment getting into the creek. This kept happening, mostly during rainstorms, but it happened also several times during dry events, which, why would that happen? But every time I got someone to come to the site with me, it's one of these organizations, I couldn't prove exactly where it was coming from because it wasn't happening at that exact time. So, dog crying in the background. I was frustrated with all of this because, well, you could clearly see what was going wrong. I knew it was bad. It had to be against some kind of law or code or something, but I didn't know which. So many of you are saying probably, why is this bad? Like, it looks bad. Obviously, that's one reason, but there's many ecological problems that come with this sediment getting into the creek. So yeah, there's many ecological problems. Sorry about that. There's many ecological problems with this happening in the creek. It blocks the sunlight that aquatic plants need, such as algae. It clogs the stream bottom habitat for macroinvertebrates, invertebrates, and fish. It clouds the vision of the bald eagle trying to catch the trout in the stream. It helps chemical hitchhikers such as phosphorus get into the creek and travel. Elevates the risk of waterborne bacteria. I could keep going with the problems that this causes. So this was an ongoing issue, and I knew I needed help. So like I said, anytime I got someone to come out to the site, couldn't prove what's happening. So the results I wanted weren't happening. The first time I reported this was November 26, 2018. The last time I reported this was just a couple months ago, October 30th, 2020. I've reported this a total of 38 times, give or take. I have pictures to prove it each time I reported it. And I think a total of 2 fines or so came from this. I'm not exactly sure. So, like I said, this is an ongoing issue and I needed help. And I knew it was bad. I knew it was against some kind of code or law, but I didn't know which. So, next slide. What I didn't know. There was a lot I didn't know when I went into this. I didn't know how to prove it. I didn't know who to report it to, and I didn't know what to say when I was reporting it because I didn't know what specifically was going wrong and why this construction site was failing or their practices were failing and this was still happening and getting into the creek because I knew there was codes and laws to prevent it, but I couldn't prove what they were. So that was a problem. But I did learn a lot in this struggling and frustration. Mainly, I learned you have to stay calm and you have to leave emotions out of this. Like I said in 2018, you have to leave the pitchforks at home. You're very mad, you're angry, you're emotional. You want to do something about it, but that doesn't get you anywhere. So that leading to you have to work with instead of against the people doing this. And then you have to learn that you can't just go into this and say, that's bad, change it, please. You have to learn. You have to learn the best practices, the laws, the key terms that go with this so you can make a valid point and prove what's happening, which I couldn't do at the beginning. So this led to partnerships. You have to begin partnerships before this stuff happens. You have to begin these partnerships with everyone that you're going to learn about tonight and who to report this stuff to. Don't let the first time you report this stuff be the first time you reach out to these people. Get to know these people before you report to them. So that's your townships, your community development committees, your all sorts of things like that. Get in touch with them. You'll learn about those tonight. So after I was frustrated, I didn't know all this stuff. What happened next? Slide 4, please. So basically, I learned from my mistakes and I put some research into it. And I realized, yes, we can do something about this. But like I said before, those are the lessons I learned. And then I did research, came in contact with the River Network and Gail Killam, funded by the William Penn and DRWI Connections. She was able to work with me, and that's when in 2018 we released version 1 of construction site monitoring. Along with that, we were trying to figure out 2 different routes to take this. And the best 2 ways we found were going to township meetings and preventing development from happening to begin with. So that's going to your local zoning board committee meetings and your community development committee meetings, and making sure that all development is being done responsibly and rules aren't being changed and things like that. That's a whole nother webinar. But that is the first step of preventing these construction sites from happening. If they're bad construction sites being built on floodplains and things like that. But that's another webinar. And tonight we're here for the stream keepers in the community. What can they do to prevent things like that? So like I said, that's when Construction Site Monitoring 1 was born. Quite some time has passed since we've worked with that. But I'm happy to say, and that's why we're here tonight, we're here for Construction Site Monitoring version 2, which we have a lot more permission. It's no longer a borrowed program per se. It's rebranded. Yeah, without any further ado, River Network and Colleen Walters, she is the new Gail per se, but she's taken this to a whole nother level, reached out to so many people and put a lot of work into this. So that's how I got started. And then here is Colleen to unveil the construction site monitoring version 2.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. That was great. A great background. And so, yes, like Kevin said, we want to bring to you today the resources and tools and materials to help you take action if you do see a sediment-laden river or stream in your neighborhood, or if you see a whole lot of mud on a construction site. We don't want you to feel powerless. We want you to know that you do have ways to take action and to be watchdogs for your local streams. So my name is Colleen Walters. I am the Delaware River Basin Program Manager for River Network. And I am also a Wissahickon creek watcher. So I'm a fellow volunteer as well. So it's really nice to be here with all of you tonight. And like Kevin said, this is adapted from another program, quite a few programs actually. And I want to acknowledge them because a lot of the materials that we have adapted for this region did come from other programs. So programs like North Carolina's Muddy Water Watch Citizen Patrol. There's an Alabama Muddy Water Watch program, Upper Chattahoochee Riverkeeper Get the Dirt Out. And the Delaware Riverkeeper Network does also have a Muddy Waters Watch project program. It's a little bit outdated, but it still has some really great information and it's available online. And I also do want to give thanks to all of the local organizations and groups that have helped me put these materials together, specifically the conservation districts. Bucks County and Montgomery County, Chester and Delaware County conservation districts have been really big help in trying to sift through the details of who to contact and what to do when it comes to reporting these instances. And of course, Pennypack and TTF and Wissahickon Trails have been really great and big help as well. So just really quickly, a little bit about River Network. We are a national organization. I am situated here in Ambler, Pennsylvania, which is in Montgomery County. But we do work nationally and we have staff all over the country, and we work to connect and empower local water-focused nonprofits working toward healthy waters, clean and healthy rivers. And we have a focus on clean and accessible drinking water policy, robust and effective policies. We have an agricultural program, and I'm missing one. But that's okay. If you want more information on all of our programs and all of our key focus areas, you can go to rivernetwork.org and check it out. We also have a newsletter that you can sign up for. So today's agenda, first I want to go through the overall problem, stormwater runoff, and how it relates to construction sites, and then the policies that govern those construction sites and enforcement, and then get into, of course, why we're all here, what you can do to help protect your streams against this construction stormwater runoff. So we'll start with the problem. Looking at this picture here, I think we can all agree there is a problem. You see a crazy amount of sediment in the stream right here, which, as Kevin mentioned, has a whole lot of implications for both water quality, aquatic life, even recreation. You don't want to go swimming or paddling down a river that looks like this. So how does this happen? So first I want to talk about how stormwater runoff is part of the hydrologic cycle and how it flows depending on land use. So on the right, you have an undisturbed acre of land, right? You see grasses, shrubs, and trees. And so this diagram is showing 45 inches of rain. It's a little small, so hopefully you can see that, but it says 45 inches of rain is falling on this land right here. And some of the things that you'll notice is you have nearly full aquifer of water. You have a base flow of 12 inches, which is a healthy base flow, and then 25% of that is being evapotranspirated back into the atmosphere, which is fueling that hydrologic cycle. Now, if you look on the right, on a developed acre of land, you have impervious surfaces right smack in the middle. You have a parking lot. And now impervious surfaces are things that don't allow water to penetrate into the ground. So things like materials like concrete, asphalt, brick. So, roads, sidewalks, parking lots, roofs, and even compacted soils can be considered impervious surfaces. So in this diagram, you can see that it's quite a bit different from the one on the left. You have not a lot of aquifer recharge. You have a very big reduction in base flow. So you don't have anything feeding that groundwater or feeding that groundwater or the underground aquifer. And out of 45 inches of rain that fall on that plot, 43 inches of that is runoff. So that water is just running off of that parking lot without seeping into the ground or being evapotranspirated back into the atmosphere. So where does all of that rainwater go? And this is just another sort of way to look at impervious surfaces as it pertains to the Delaware Basin. So this is a map of the Delaware Basin, and the different shades of red pertain to the different percentages of impervious surface that we see throughout the basin. The upper basin you'll see is very light, very low amounts of impervious surface, because much of this upper basin is a forested region. And then we go down here into the lower basin, and you see those shades of red are getting much darker. This circle here is generally where your cluster is. Don't hold me to that because I know it's not totally accurate, but you know, this is right around the Philadelphia area, Philadelphia suburbs. And so we have those much darker colors, which could be anywhere from 20% to like nearly 70% impervious surfaces, which means that when it does rain, there is not a whole lot of places for the rainwater to seep into the ground. So most of it is being collected through runoff. And so where does that runoff go? And so this is sort of a depiction of that cycle, where the runoff goes, right? So it's running off of the sidewalk into an inlet, which goes into a storm sewer, which leads to an outlet right into a water body. And this runoff isn't just rolling off, you know, clean rainwater, right? It's picking up things from the roads and the sidewalks. It's picking up things like oil and gas, trash. It's picking up different pollutants, and it's taking that with it into the water body. And not only that, but it's also during heavy rainstorms, it's going through that channel in a very high velocity. So you have a lot of rainwater rushing into that inlet, rushing into that storm sewer, and going out into that outlet into the water body, which is increasing the turbidity of the water body, increasing the flow of that water body, which can also lead to more sedimentation and erosion. So we're here to talk about construction sites. So I would like everyone to picture a nice new housing development plopped right next to that house right there. So what are some of the things that you are seeing with that construction site? What does it look like? What's on the site? What isn't on the site? And so you might be thinking something like this. Not a lot of vegetation, you know, all of the grasses have been removed. There's construction equipment on the site. There's probably, you know, a lot of houses being constructed, so there's materials strewn across the on the ground, and a lot of dirt, right? You're seeing a lot of dirt. And so now I want you to picture it raining. And what does the site look like now? The site is very muddy, right? The site is gross and muddy and mucky. And if there are no control structures in place to hold back that mud and to hold back that muddy water, you might see something like this. You know, you see like muddy water on the sidewalk, and note that the storm sewer is very close to that muddy water. And then the muddy water getting into the storm sewer, and you might see something like this in your nearby waterway, right? Something like what Kevin saw. And so, so this is a big problem. And so just to sort of define what I mean by sedimentation and erosion. So erosion is what sort of breaks off of the land, that the eroded particles break off of the land, whereas sedimentation is the process by which that eroded sediment is then transported and deposited by water, wind, ice, or gravity. And it's also important to know that sedimentation and that sediment in the water does have the ability to hold on to a lot more toxins and pollutants and bring it with it as it is transported into the water body. So sediments pick up a whole lot of things like metals, oils, toxins, pathogens, and bacteria, which can really impair the water quality in your local waterways. So why are construction sites so risky when it comes to rain events? Well, construction sites, typically they're going to remove all of the vegetation from the site, remove the topsoil, and they're just going to have that exposed soil with nothing to hold it back, really. Vegetation and grasses, they do a lot of the work in reducing velocity of rainwater and of runoff. And so without that, you're really just allowing the rainwater to, do whatever it wants, basically. And through that, it can also create a whole lot of conduits too, right? Water is going to go to a place of least resistance. And so it's going to create channels on the land, which also can reshape the land and cause more erosion, because you are really increasing the velocity of that runoff with nothing really holding it back. And so when construction sites don't have erosion and sediment control structures, which I'm going to get into, but so the danger here is when they don't have the structures, or when they're poorly maintained, it leads to things like increased runoff velocity, high levels of erosion and sedimentation, can be very destructive to the land when you do have those high velocities of water, and reduced water infiltration, right? Going back to the original diagrams that I showed you with the basically no water infiltration whatsoever when you talk about impervious surfaces. So increasing the velocity of the water flow is also going to reduce the amount of water that actually infiltrates into the ground. And it also harms aquatic life. Kevin mentioned a few of these before, but blocking the sunlight, the really murky water is not going to allow the sunlight to reach into the water column and allow aquatic plants to photosynthesize and really function properly, and not allow them to release oxygen into the water. And drops in dissolved oxygen also are issues for fish, mussels, and other species that really rely on that oxygen. And it also can reduce visibility for predators. So, predators definitely need to be able to see their prey. And when they're not able to do that, they are not able to eat. And then, once the sediment settles to the bottom, you have issues for both those species that feed on bottom dwellers, but also the bottom dwellers themselves. They aren't able to survive in environments with heavy amounts of sediment. So that's the problem. And now I'm going to go through some of the policies and permitting systems that help to govern the control structures around construction sites to ensure that sediment-laden waters do not enter the stream systems. And I do want to start with federal laws to sort of give you an overall understanding of where local permitting comes from. So, and I want to talk about it in the context of the Clean Water Act. And so the Clean Water Act is a federal law. It was enacted by Congress about 50 years ago, and it is implemented by the Environmental Protection Agency. And so the Environmental Protection Agency then flows down the responsibility to every state to implement the Clean Water Act in their own state, to ensure that the protections and enforcement under the Clean Water Act are going smoothly and are well enforced. And so the state will put together things like laws, rules, and programs to ensure that the Clean Water Act is enforced in their state. And then through those laws, rules, and programs comes local permitting and ordinances that are usually enforced or issued by local conservation districts or municipalities. And so the Clean Water Act, the objective of the act is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. One of the goals of the act is to eliminate the discharge of pollutants to surface water, which means that any discharge of a pollutant through a point source requires a permit. And so those permits are sort of, so those permits come from the limits that are put on it by the water quality standards. So each state is required to establish water quality standards for each one of its water bodies that fall under the umbrella of the Clean Water Act. And the water quality standards are have a few parts, mainly establishing a goal or establishing how that water body is used, and then establishing water quality criteria to ensure that those uses are protected and able to be maintained. And so pollution limits are, part of those water quality criteria. So, ensuring that the amount of pollution that enters the water is not so much that the uses are not able to be sustained. So the permits are governed the permits are part of the water quality standards, water quality criteria. And so I mentioned that every point source discharge to a surface water requires a permit. And so what exactly do I mean by a point source? So any discernible, confined, or discrete conveyance from which pollutants are or may be discharged. So things like pipes, ditches, channels, tunnels, any sort of conduit that is going to channel any pollutants into a surface water. So is this a point source? So this is a storm sewer. And you're welcome to use the chat to let me know what you think. Do you all think this is a point source or not? Any takers? So this is, and yeah, right, I probably could do with some more context, but it is actually a point source. So this is a storm sewer that is going to end up, being channeled through a storm sewer system and end up with an outfall in a water body. So it is a channelized system that is potentially funneling pollutants into a water body. So so it does actually require a permit. So so any sort of municipal storm sewer system does require a permit under the Clean Water Act. And so when we're talking about permits, any disturbance of 1 acre of land or more will require a permit. So any construction project that is over 1 acre of land will require a permit because of that discharge that that will end up in the storm sewer. And that's not to say that any project less than 1 acre will not be regulated whatsoever. It depends on the location and likely the conservation district. But if it's under 1 acre, it's likely going to require some sort of erosion and sediment control plan as well. And so it's either the state or the county conservation district that will be issuing the permit, again, depending on the situation and the project itself. And there are 2 types of permits that are generally issued. There's a general permit that is more for like your typical construction project. And then there's also an individual permit that might require a little bit more specific detail and a little bit more requirements, because it's probably going to be a little bit more risk to the environment. So areas that are close to exceptional value or high quality waters, areas that are near impaired waters, if there's any threatened or endangered species around, or if that construction company has had some compliance problems historically, they might need an individual permit. And so these permits contain generally things like an erosion and sedimentation management plan, a post-construction stormwater management plan. They also have searches to ensure, any threatened or endangered species won't be in the areas. Making sure thermal impacts won't be a problem, or, again, making sure that there aren't any exceptional value or high quality waters that will result in any drop in water quality. And if the site is near an actual stream, making sure the riparian buffer requirements are set. And so what I'm mainly going to be talking about are best management practices. These plans have a whole lot of best management practices, and that's usually what is being enforced. And so those are going to be sort of like the bulk of what you'll want to be looking out for too, is these standard best management practices to control the erosion and the sediment on site, to make sure there are no compliance issues and there's no sedimentation running into the storm sewers. So, like I said, best management practices are to control both erosion and sedimentation. Erosion control best management practices really want to focus on controlling that sediment, making sure it stays in place, making sure it doesn't erode away from the land. And so that's, maximizing soil cover to minimize the soil loss. Things like mulching the area or putting down vegetative filter strips to make sure that the soil stays in one place and doesn't run off. And then sediment control structures are sort of a backup to the erosion control structures. They should not be in place of erosion control structures. You definitely need both of those to work together. But sediment control structures are things like silt fences or compost filter socks that kind of absorb the water and make sure that and trap the sediment, and make sure the sediment does not run off the site. Okay, so now we're going to get into the what can you do section of the presentation. So you come across a site like this, you know that it looks bad, and you know that you see structures failing, and what can you do? So, you can take pictures, you can write down all of the details, you can report it. And we're going to give you should have all the materials, but I'll go through that next. So you see this site, and then another thing that you can do as well is you can do some investigating. You can go to the local stream nearby and make sure that the sediment isn't running off into the waterway. You look upstream, you see a perfectly clear creek, look downstream, you see a whole bunch of muddy water. And on the flip side, if you see this scenario first, if you're, walking through your local park and you see muddy water, you can look for a storm sewer, see if there's muddy water pumping out of the storm sewer, or, you can go see if there are construction sites nearby, and perhaps that is the source of this sedimentation. And so we're going to give you the tools to be able to observe the site, to report issues, and to also make sure you follow up on those reports. But the main thing that I do want to stress is no trespassing. We don't want you to trespass on private property. We don't want you to walk onto active construction sites, particularly when there are safety hazards. So, make sure that you are staying safe. We don't want to make you, feel uncomfortable in any way. And so, definitely don't go confront a construction operator and start yelling at him because of his control structures. So definitely no trespassing. Don't want to get anybody in trouble. There are a lot of things that you can see from the sidewalk or from a distance or from, a public area. So what are we looking for, right? We're looking for compliance of best management practices. So are the designs, the installation, the maintenance, are they working properly? And one of the best ways to test this out is to go to a site right after it rains. So we definitely recommend that you get out there within 24 hours of rain, see how the structures are holding up. Without even knowing much about silt fences, I think looking at this picture right here, you can tell that it's a violation and it's not working properly. So we definitely want you to get out there right after it rains, check out the storm sewer, see if there's water running into the storm sewer, and take pictures and document what you see. And so there's a lot that you can see without trespassing. Clearly in these pictures, lots of mud, mud running into storm sewers, structures that don't look so great. So definitely there are a lot of things that you can see without going too close to the site. And we also recommend when you do take pictures, take good pans of the site, but also get pictures of the storm sewers if you can. You'll see in these pictures, you can see the one on the top left, you can see the storm sewer, one on the top right, you can see the storm sewer as well. So those are good pictures to have. And so I know I didn't go through too much of the BMPs, but just as a little exercise, looking at this picture, and you can use the chat, what sort of violations do you see right here that you would jot down if you saw them? There are a few violations. So tracking of sediment on the roadways, definitely. Silt fence not working, good eye. Good eye. So there are actually 3 violations here. And I think the third one isn't too fair because it's quite far away. And let me see if I can, okay. So we have silt fence in need of maintenance, sediment on the road, and then a little far back here, you'll see disturbed areas that need some stabilization. But you see these areas that are on a hill, definitely likely about to run down that hill with no structure whatsoever, high velocity, not something that you really want to see on a construction site. So now we'll get into the materials. So I think everyone should have received the package of materials. I think Kevin sent it out and went out through the registration. But so I'm just going to go through them briefly here. And the first thing that you should check out are the sort of how to use guide, which is going to go through just an overview of the program, but also talk about the right time to assess the site, when to go out onto a site, and how to do that. When and how to report, and then also there's a section on contact information that is specific to your areas. So it has local conservation district contacts, and it also has the DEP emergency contact line. If you see active pollution sites, you definitely want to call the DEP emergency contact line, along with the conservation district and your municipality. You just want to call everybody if there's an active site happening, and then they can sort of decide who is responsible for enforcing those issues. And so contact information section, and then there's also a follow-up section on when to follow up, the right timing around to follow up, and how to do so. So there is a site report card, which has a checklist of your typical best management practices that you're going to see on the site. Things like how does the stormwater look? Is there sediment in the stormwater? Silt fences, do the silt fences look good? Do they need repair? Soil cover, vegetation, has the soil been disturbed recently? Sediment traps, check dams, basins. So all of these are things that you want to look out for and check up on from a distance. And in case you aren't familiar with those best management practices, we do have a pictorial field guide. The first row of the guide is going to show you what a properly functioning best management practice looks like. So you'll know what to look out for and what it should look like. The next two rows are the, it's okay, but if you had a big rainstorm, it probably wouldn't be so okay. And then the final, the bottom row is what you definitely don't want to see. These are the definitely not properly maintained best management practices. We also have a site journal that you can bring with you out to the site and record, observations, when it last rained, conditions, comments, and then did you take any photos? And a report log. If you do decide to make a report, this is a really good log to keep all of the details on paper, so it's not just in your head. You definitely want to, write down who you contacted, when you contacted them, what information did you give them, how familiar were they with the site, and did they take any enforcement action? So, and that's where the follow-up comes from too. You want to, record when you contacted someone and did enforcement take place, what happened, did it get resolved? So this is a good place to really record all of those actions. And so follow up, your problem was resolved, wonderful, great job. Or the problem persists, continue to document, continue to go out there. Kevin has gone out, 38 times, and hopefully that's not the case for every one of these sites, but continue to document, continue to go out there, and continue to contact your local authorities. And also don't make sure to document good BMPs and contractors that are really keeping up with the standards and keeping up with the maintenance of the best management practices. This also will allow you to, sort of train your eye on what good best management practices look like. And so again, I do want to highlight that these materials did come from another program. You can go to muddywaterwatch.com. They still have a lot of good information on their site. Their program isn't actually up and running still, I don't think, but if you want more information, you can go to muddywaterwatch.com. Again, get the dirt out from Upper Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, and then the Muddy Waters Project from Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And I think actually now, do we want to go to Ryan for a nice success story to wrap everything up?
Sure. I'm just going to share a brief story then from one of our stream keepers. Oh, first let me introduce myself, I guess, for anybody who doesn't know. My name is Brian. I'm the upstream conservation leader at TTF. So I manage the stream keepers at TTF. So hello to everyone who I haven't met before, and everyone I haven't seen in person in ages. So I was just going to share a brief little success story for a couple minutes here. One of the important things to remember too is that although you can see changes and improvements in the construction site, just because one thing got fixed and an issue might be corrected, there could still be new issues that arise then. So just because an issue got corrected, don't then just say, oh, the construction site's fine. I mean, the construction site could be there for a full year still, and another control measure could fail then. So the story's from a couple years ago. One of our stream keepers on the call today, Dave Bell, was a phenomenal stream keeper and wonderful, notices stuff like this and is always helpful and diligent. he was out driving by in Abington, and he noticed then when it was raining that there was just sediment, like some of the pictures we saw there, muddy water that was just sort of running right into the storm drains then. And so what he did was he had attended the training the first year we had did it with Kevin over at the Pennypack Trust. And so he had taken pictures, documented it, and then he contacted his local conservation district. So the conservation district officer had said that it was more than likely just a failure to a stormwater control measure, and then he would check it out. So then he waited a little bit, didn't hear anything back, followed up with him again, and then actually followed up with the township too. So the township sent somebody out to take a look, and they noticed some of the control measures had failed. They had talked to the contractor to correct them, and the problem had sort of resolved itself and been a little bit better. There was improvements in the water, but then that's not saying then that other issues didn't arise. So you do have to stay diligent on your construction site then, but you can make a change and you can stop these smaller things as they come to. So it's not all doom and gloom like Kevin has said before with his construction site issue where the water just continually runs brown. So you can affect change, you just have to be diligent then in your efforts. So that is my brief, quick story. Thanks again, Dave, for letting me share the story, and I'll turn it back over to Colleen if anybody has any questions for her.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Dave. That's a great example of, I mean, that's why we do this stuff, is so people like you can help us and get out there and actually do this stuff. So prime example that we can use this to make a difference. I think we already have the two questions answered for Deborah in the chat there, but those were both decent questions, and Google obviously did a better job explaining it than I could. It also comes with pictures and examples. It's better to see this stuff in person than me trying to explain like a metal hat with holes covering a storm drain cover. So Google just does a much better job at explaining, just showing you what those questions are. So her questions were, what is a trash rack? Then, like I said in the chat, they're designed to prevent floating and submerged debris from entering the stormwater. So the water passes through perfectly fine, but it traps the bigger, larger things. And then she asked what a rill was, I believe. Yeah, a rill. And it's kind of like if you ever looked at the desert and you see any like all those cracks in it. That's what the pictures look like it is, but it's basically where water runs across the surface and creates like little tiny rivers for ants. Like I said, Google does a much better job at explaining it than I do with pictures. So the only two questions I saw come in so far. Jeffrey's going to keep his clipboard. That's the best way to do this stuff. It's because unless you know that a construction site's happening and you've been watching them, like I kept my eyes on one specific site. It's a lot of work to keep track of this stuff, and you have to be dedicated. But that's a good call. If you're out and about during a rainstorm or any point in time and you want to know what's going wrong and you want to report something, that's a good way to do it. Just bring it with you, have it in your car at all times. It's also always in your email now that I've sent it to you. Any other questions?
A question from Peter about the use of a stream, how a use is defined. There can be more than one use, and there often are more than one use for a water body. So your stream could be, its designated uses could be recreation, and it could also be aquatic life. So an aquatic life use will have water quality criteria that is going to protect against sedimentation and any other water pollutants that would make it impossible for a fish to survive in that water body.
That's a good question, Peter. That's why this stuff is so important. Working with River Network, change those definitions if it's being used for something else as well. But that could be a whole nother webinar in itself. I believe that's a process right there.
Yes, yeah.
But if that's something people are interested in, I think we could put that together.
Certainly, yeah. If you see your stream being used for something that it's not protected for, then there are processes that we can go through under the Clean Water Act to make sure that those uses are protected. And like Kevin said, that's probably multiple webinars, but happy to talk more about that if folks are interested.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that is kind of what River Network specializes in, is the policy behind a lot of this stuff.
Yes, yeah. And so we also like to work with local organizations too, because you're the boots on the ground, you are the eyes, and so much more what's going on locally than maybe your Department of Environmental Protection does. And so we want to use the information that you all are finding and help facilitate those discussions with the states, and hope to get upgrades in policy and protections if there's a need for it.
Which leads us into our next comment / question from Carol. Someone else chatted and I lost it for a second. The heavy rains from climate change are overwhelming current erosion sediment controls for construction sites. Can't argue with that. 2018 was one of in our area, the wettest years ever. So the state will be releasing new regulations taking into account climate change this year or next ? Does anyone presenting know if there will be stricter construction controls required? I do not know, but boy, I hope so. And that is something worth pursuing, I believe. If that is, where did you hear, Carol, you can turn your mic on if you want. Where did you hear the state will be releasing? Is that a question or is that?
No, I just wasn't sure if it was this year or next. I'm sorry, it was another webinar where, an informed person said that they would be releasing it soon, but no one knows. No one that I've talked to knows whether construction site controls are going to be upgraded. BMPs are going to be upgraded, and we really need them for construction sites. We really need them changed. They're just going to have to do overkill. They're going to have to overkill their controls.
Carol, my best guess is
Sorry,
that maybe
Megan.
that was a reference to the state BMP manual, the stormwater BMP manual being updated. That's been a process that's been going on with Villanova University for the past few years. I'm guessing that was the reference, but I didn't hear the same comment that you did, so I'm just kind of guessing.
No, I think that's right. I think that's the reference. That my question is, are they going to address construction site BMPs for sedimentation and erosion?
Carol, we'll definitely keep an eye on that. Let Megan, unless you have better insight.
I'm not aware of any changes kind of on that side of things right now. Certainly the stormwater BMP manual is part of the permitting process for construction sites, but I can look into that and get back to you guys about it.
Awesome, thank you, Megan. And like I said in the beginning, like the best way to make any difference where you are is to go to your township, go to your commissioners, attend zoning board committee meetings, attend community development committee meetings. Attending those meetings is your voice. So if there's things you want to see changed or policies in your township or your locality, sorry, Deborah, Philadelphia is a whole different world for me. So cities like Philadelphia are tougher, but if you live in Upper Moreland Township, Lower Moreland Township, these things are easy to stay on top of, and they have to listen to you if that's where you live. So Carol, that's my suggestion, but then we'll keep in touch with Megan if there's something we can do on a larger scale. But for most of this stuff, locally is the best way to make a difference. Next question, is there a list of BMPs in the handouts? I didn't have time to review them. Things besides silk fences and keeping as much of the land as planted as possible. Generally, yes, there's pictures of each. Like she said, each row has the good practices, not so great failing practices, and then the failing practices. So those are the things we're looking for.
And that checklist also has a good list of the BMPs too, without the pictures, but it's a good checklist to go through.
Okay. I have one more question here, so if anyone else has a question, type it in while I'm reading this next question from Deborah. She says, I've been monitoring a gas pipeline exchange going on at Tookaney Creek Parkway. When they were setting up, I walked the entire perimeter taking photos. I noticed the workers watching me, so I went over to them and introduced myself as a local watershed volunteer and that I would be monitoring the site. I also complimented them because they were doing a really great job protecting the creek and roadway. Follow-up checks showed they maintained best practices. Penn Environment as PA state legislators from time to time discussing current legislation. They have one coming up soon. 2 different comments, but Deborah, that first comment, that is great. Like we said, compliment good people doing the right practices and go up and thank them because they get enough negative comments across the board. Most places get negative comments across the board. Not many people just call to say you're doing a good job, which is one of the mistakes I learned. Like I said in the beginning, be friends with these people before it goes wrong. That you don't want the first time to be going after them when you're angry and they've already messed up. You want to, like Deborah said, went right away, like, hey, I'm gonna be watching you guys. Like, you have a job to do, but I'm trying to be responsible. So do your job the best you can. I'm watching. And that is the best thing that happens. I've reported mine 38 times and I've had a lot of problems. However, now it's way late, but they're being watched constantly and being checked up on. So I started late and did the opposite approach, learned the hard way. Deborah's doing it right. So good job, Deborah. Thank you for that great example. To finish up, I think on a positive note, I didn't see any other questions come in. So as always, if you guys have questions, you know me, you know Ryan, you know Megan, you're going to know your new Wissahickon Trails folks, you know Lower Marion Conservancy, and you know your contacts at Darby Creek. So if you have any questions, reach out to us. Colleen and I are both pretty available on our emails. So if you have any questions, let us know. And please get out and use this stuff. We don't do this presentation just for the fun of it. We want you to learn something and actually take it out in the field and do something with it. And I know a lot of you guys you probably already have, and you have ideas for where you're going to go monitor. So it's 8:03. I don't see any more questions. Next training. There it is. I unfroze. Erin Landis is Wissahickon Trails new water programs manager. So if she hasn't reached out to you yet, I'm sure she will soon. Thank you, Jen. We're very excited to work with you all. And like I said, pay attention. We have trainings coming up, but nothing's set in stone. So thanks for joining us for the first Streamkeeper training of 2021. Thank you so much, River Network and Colleen. This would not have been this wouldn't have happened without you, quite honestly. So thank you for putting the work in and helping us with this. It's really amazing. So thank you. And if you have questions, reach out to me. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.